Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Victoria Newman is not Victor Newman's biological daughter doesn't just rewrite a family tree, it detonates decades of loyalty, sacrifice, pride, manipulation, and emotional warfare that Victor himself carefully constructed brick by brick over a lifetime of secrets, and the sheer magnitude of this revelation sends shockwaves through every corner of the Newman empire as Victor, the man who built his life on control, power, and legacy, is forced to confront the one lie he never believed would see the light of day, a lie so deeply buried that even he convinced himself it was no longer real. Yet when the truth finally surfaces, it does so with devastating precision, unraveling the very foundation of his identity as a father and titan of Genoa City, because for years Victor Newman has ruled not just as a ruthless businessman, but as a patriarch whose greatest pride was his children, especially Victoria, the daughter he molded, challenged, underestimated, and ultimately crowned as his heir. A parent, the woman he believed carried his blood, his ambition, and his indomitable will, only for fate to cruelly reveal that the one child he saw most of himself in was never biologically his at all. And this revelation doesn't come quietly or gently, but crashes into the narrative with the force of a hurricane, exposing a long-buried truth that forces every character to reevaluate their past choices, their alliances, and even their own sense of self. Because if Victoria is not Victor's child, then who is she really? And what does that mean for everything she has fought for, earned, and sacrificed in the name of being a Newman? As the story unfolds with mounting tension when a routine situation, perhaps a medical emergency, a corporate legal maneuver requiring DNA verification, or an innocuous test meant to confirm lineage, opens a door Victor never wanted unlocked. And at first there is denial, fierce and absolute, because Victor Newman does not accept reality when it contradicts his will, and the idea that Victoria might not be his daughter feels impossible to him, an insult to his authority and his past. But the evidence keeps stacking up, cold and irrefutable, stripping away excuses until Victor is left staring at a truth he once knew but chose to bury, because deep down, somewhere in the shadows of his memory, Victor always suspected something wasn't right. A fleeting doubt born decades ago during a turbulent period in his relationship with Nikki, a time marked by betrayals, separations, and unspoken regrets, and it is revealed that Victor learned the truth long ago, or at least enough of it to know that Victoria's paternity was questionable, and instead of confronting it, he made a calculated decision to keep silent, to raise Victoria as his own, to give her his name, his protection, and his empire, because to Victor Newman, blood was important, but control and legacy were everything, and acknowledging the truth would have shattered the family image he worked so ruthlessly to maintain, and so he buried it, locked it away, and lived his life as if the lie were truth, never imagining that one day it would rise up and destroy the illusion. And when the truth finally erupts into the open, Nikki is forced to face her own past with brutal honesty, because this revelation doesn't just implicate Victor, it drags Nikki's most painful secrets into the spotlight, exposing a chapter of her life filled with confusion, vulnerability, and mistakes she believed were long forgiven or forgotten, and her reaction is a devastating mix of guilt, fear, and heartbreak, because she knows this truth will wound Victoria more deeply than anything else ever could, and the weight of knowing that her daughter's entire identity has been built on a lie crushes her, especially as she realizes that Victor's decision to hide the truth, while rooted in a twisted form of love, has robbed Victoria of the right to know who she truly is. And as Genoa City reels from the revelation, Victoria herself becomes the emotional epicenter of the storm, because no one suffers more than the woman who believed she knew exactly who she was, who spent her entire life fighting to prove herself worthy of the Newman name, enduring Victor's relentless tests, his harsh criticism, and his manipulative lessons, believing that earning his approval was synonymous with earning her place in the world, only to learn that the blood ties she thought justified that struggle never existed. And the betrayal cuts so deeply that it leaves her questioning every memory, every victory, and every painful sacrifice she made in Victor's shadow, because was she ever truly fighting for herself, Or was she fighting for a man who built her up and tore her down based on a lie? And the emotional fallout is staggering as Victoria oscillates between rage, grief, and numb disbelief, confronting Victor with a fury unlike anything he has ever faced, because this is not a business rival or an enemy he can outmaneuver. This is a daughter demanding answers, demanding to know why he played God with her life, why he let her believe she was something she was not, and Victor, for all his bluster and authority, finds himself powerless in the face of her pain, forced to admit that his silence was a choice, one he made out of fear of losing her, fear of losing control, and fear of acknowledging that even he could not dictate biology. And as this confrontation unfolds, the ripple effects extend far beyond the Newman family, sending shockwaves through Newman Enterprises as questions arise about succession, legitimacy, and power. Because if Victoria is not Victor's biological child, what does that mean for her role as CEO, for the shares she controls, and for the future of the empire itself? And suddenly the wolves of Genoa City begin to circle, with rivals and opportunists seeing an opening in the chaos, ready to exploit the uncertainty for their own gain, while Adam, Nick, and the rest of the Newman clan are forced to confront their own complicated reactions to the news, because Adam, who has always felt like the outsider, the son who had to fight for every scrap of Victor's acknowledgement, may feel a bitter sense of irony or even vindication, realizing that the sister who seemed so perfectly placed within the Newman hierarchy may not be the golden child by blood after all, while Nick struggles with loyalty and confusion, torn between supporting his sister and grappling with the realization that the family he thought he understood is built on layers of deception, and as the truth spreads, alliances shift, old wounds reopen, and long-standing resentments boil to the surface. Because this revelation doesn't exist in isolation, it reframes every past conflict, every moment when Victor favored or punished Victoria, every time Nikki defended her family at the cost of her own peace. And even the history of Newman versus Abbott takes on new meaning, as Jack Abbott, long entangled with both Nikki and Victor, may find himself pulled into the narrative once more, especially if the truth about Victoria's paternity connects back to an old, forbidden chapter involving him and the possibility that Jack could be Victoria's biological father, or at least connected to the truth in some unexpected way, adds another explosive layer to an already volatile situation, because if that is the case, then the rivalry between Victor and Jack takes on an almost mythic dimension, transforming from corporate warfare into a deeply personal tragedy where the lines between enemy and family blur beyond recognition. And as Victoria grapples with the implications of her true parentage, she is forced to ask herself what truly defines her, because if being a Newman was a lie, then what remains? And this existential crisis drives some of the most powerful emotional storytelling the show has ever delivered, as Victoria confronts the reality that her strength, intelligence, and resilience were never inherited from Victor's blood but forged through her own experiences, her own choices, and her own survival in a world dominated by larger-than-life personalities. And this realization becomes both devastating and empowering, because while the lie shatters her past, it also offers her a chance to redefine her future on her own terms, free from the impossible expectations of living up to Victor Newman's legacy. Yet the path forward is anything but simple, because Victor, despite everything, still sees Victoria as his daughter in every way that matters to him, and his struggle becomes one of the most complex emotional arcs of his character, as he is forced to reckon with the consequences of his lifelong obsession with control, realizing too late that by trying to protect his family, he ultimately hurt them in the deepest way possible. And as he attempts to make amends, to prove that love can exist beyond blood, he faces the terrifying possibility that Victoria may choose to walk away from him, from Newman Enterprises, and from the identity he gave her, leaving him to confront the emptiness left behind by his own decisions. And in true Young and the Restless fashion, this revelation doesn't resolve quickly or neatly, but instead continues to reverberate through Genoa City, influencing romances, betrayals, and power struggles for months and years to come, as characters are forced to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and the people they love, because the Question at the heart of this storyline is not simply who Victoria's biological father is, but what truly makes a family and whether love, loyalty, and shared history can survive when the foundational truth is revealed to be a lie. And as viewers watch the fallout unfold, they are reminded why The Young and the Restless remains a masterclass in long-form storytelling, capable of turning a single revelation into a sweeping, emotionally charged saga that challenges its characters and its audience alike, leaving everyone asking the same haunting question: if the truth had come out sooner, would anything have been different? Or was this explosive moment always inevitable, waiting patiently for the day when Victor Newman's long-buried secret could no longer remain hidden? As the shock of the revelation continues to reverberate, the emotional aftershocks deepen and darken, turning what began as a stunning disclosure into a slow-burning psychological and emotional reckoning that refuses to let any character escape unscathed, because once the truth is out, it cannot be contained. And Victoria's life begins to unravel in ways both subtle and explosive as she realizes that the Newman name she wore like armor has also been a cage, one constructed by a man who loved her fiercely yet deceptively, and this realization eats away at her with every passing day, manifesting in sleepless nights, sharp confrontations, and moments of quiet devastation when she looks at Victor and no longer knows whether to see him as her father, her manipulator, or both. And the tragedy of it all is that Victor himself is finally forced to confront a reality he has spent his entire life avoiding: the truth that his power cannot erase pain, that his money cannot undo emotional damage, and that his silence, which he once justified as protection, has become the most unforgivable betrayal of all, because in trying to preserve his family, he denied Victoria her autonomy, her truth, and her right to define herself on her own terms. And as this guilt settles in, Victor's once unshakable confidence begins to crack, revealing a man haunted by the knowledge that his greatest legacy may not be Newman Enterprises, but the emotional wreckage he leaves behind. And nowhere is this more evident than in his strained interactions with Nikki, whose own guilt grows heavier with every tear Victoria sheds, because Nikki is forced to acknowledge that her silence was not passive but complicit, that she allowed Victor's will to override her maternal instinct, and that in doing so, she sacrificed honesty for stability, a trade-off that now feels unbearably cruel. And their once familiar dynamic of love and war transforms into something far more fragile, as both grapple with the realization that the truth they buried together has become the weapon that could destroy them. And while Victor lashes out in frustration, Nikki turns inward, drowning in regret and self-blame, knowing that no apology can ever fully repair the damage done to their daughter. And as the family fractures, the rest of Genoa City cannot help but react, because secrets of this magnitude do not stay contained within one household, especially not when the Newmans are involved, and whispers begin to circulate through boardrooms and backrooms alike, with business rivals and so-called allies alike questioning whether Victoria's authority at Newman Enterprises is still legitimate, whether her leadership can survive the scandal, and whether Victor's judgment can be trusted after such a monumental deception. And in this atmosphere of doubt and opportunism, long-dormant ambitions are reignited, as enemies see a chance to strike, believing that the empire is finally vulnerable, and yet, paradoxically, it is in this moment of vulnerability that Victoria begins to reveal a strength that has nothing to do with bloodlines or inherited power, because stripped of the illusion of being Victor's biological daughter, she is forced to confront who she truly is beneath the Newman name, and this journey is neither quick nor easy, as she grapples with rage so intense it borders on hatred, grief so profound it feels suffocating, and confusion that leaves her questioning every meaningful relationship in her life, including her own sense of worth. And yet, slowly, painfully, she begins to realize that her accomplishments were never handed to her because of DNA, that her resilience was forged through years of struggle, failure, and perseverance, and that her identity does not vanish simply because the story she was told about her origins was false. And this realization becomes a turning point, not just for Victoria, but for the narrative itself, because instead of collapsing under the weight of the truth, she begins to reshape it, asserting her right to define herself beyond Victor's shadow, and this evolution terrifies Victor more than any enemy ever could, because for the first time, he cannot control her trajectory, cannot manipulate her with approval or punishment, and cannot assume that she will always choose the Newman Empire over her own emotional survival. And as Victoria distances herself, both emotionally and professionally, Victor is forced to confront the very real possibility that he may lose her not through rejection, but through her newfound independence, and this fear drives him to desperate attempts at reconciliation, moments of raw vulnerability that are both startling and heartbreaking, as he tries to articulate a love that has always existed but was buried beneath layers of control and ego, and yet, no matter how sincere his remorse may be, the damage remains. Because trust once shattered cannot be restored overnight, and Victoria's wounds are too deep to be healed by words alone, and while the Newman family struggles to adapt, Adam's reaction adds another volatile layer to the story, because for Adam, this revelation is both validating and destabilizing, confirming his long-held belief that the family's narrative has always been selective, always shaped by Victor's convenience, and yet, instead of feeling triumph, Adam is confronted with a complicated mix of empathy and resentment, recognizing in Victoria a pain that mirrors his own lifelong sense of alienation, and this shared understanding creates the possibility of an unexpected alliance, or perhaps an even more intense rivalry, as both siblings grapple with what it means to be a Newman when the definition itself is suddenly unclear, and Nick, caught in the middle, becomes the emotional anchor of the family, struggling to hold everyone together while processing his own shock. Because if Victor could lie about something so fundamental, then what else has been hidden? What other truths are waiting to surface? And this doubt seeps into every interaction, eroding the certainty that once defined the Newman household. And beyond the immediate family, the revelation sends ripples through long-standing relationships, forcing characters like Jack Abbott to confront their own complicated histories with Nikki and Victor. And the possibility that Jack may be connected to Victoria's true paternity looms like a specter, reopening wounds that never truly healed. And if that possibility is confirmed, it would not only redefine Victoria's identity, but also reframe decades of rivalry between Victor and Jack, transforming it from a battle of titans into a tragic story of jealousy, loss, and stolen truths. And even if Jack is not the biological father, his presence in this narrative underscores the theme that no secret exists in isolation, that every lie leaves a trail of collateral damage that stretches far beyond its original context. And as the weeks turn into months, the fallout from Victor's long-buried truth continues to evolve, influencing romantic relationships, corporate strategies, and personal loyalties, as characters are forced to decide whether they are defined by blood, by choice, or by the stories they tell themselves to survive. And Victoria's journey becomes emblematic of this struggle, as she stands at a crossroads, faced with the choice to either cling to the Newman identity out of habit and obligation, or to forge a new path that honors her truth, even if it means walking away from everything she once believed was her destiny. And this tension creates some of the most emotionally charged storytelling the show has ever delivered, as scenes oscillate between explosive confrontations and quiet, devastating moments of introspection, reminding viewers that the most powerful drama often lies not in grand gestures, but in the painful process of self-discovery. And through it all, Victor Newman, the man who built his empire on secrecy and control, is left to face the ultimate irony of his life, that the truth he feared would destroy his family has instead revealed the fragility of the bonds he took for granted, forcing him to confront the question he has avoided for decades: can love survive when it is built on a lie? And as Genoa City watches the Newman family navigate this uncharted territory, the story lingers not on easy resolutions, but on the enduring consequences of deception, the resilience of identity, and the haunting realization that some truths, once revealed, change everything forever, ensuring that this explosive chapter in The Young and the Restless will be remembered not just as a shocking twist, but as a profound exploration of what it truly means to belong.